Content warning. This documentary includes discussion of suicide, death, trauma, and grief. Viewer discretion advised. If you are in suicidal crisis or emotional distress, call 988. Everyone has acted as though making this documentary is such a noble thing. They tell me it's such a beautiful way to remember you. But the truth is, I don't need a documentary to remember you. And honestly, this isn't your story. It's mine. When we lost you, my whole world fell apart.
Grief is not a cycle. Like, you cannot just figure it's going to happen in one way and it's going to be the same way for every person. Some people are just angry, sad. It's a multitude of responses.
Anger is a little bit easier to feel, I think, than like despair. Because when you're in despair, it's so hopeless. You feel more powerless.
It seems foggy. People are talking, but you're not able to recall things just after a minute or two, and it's like by the time you get to your car, it was like, what was that conversation about? I can't, you just feel, off. It's like of a piece of twine, a roll of twine. So some are integrated, some you see short and some are long. Each one of those strings and that pieces that you see is an emotion. Some are real quick and others are long, and then that one kind of comes in, and grieving is exhausting.
There are certain things that you think about in a very different way. Sometimes you maybe feel guilty or like, I get to experience this, but you didn't. And then you feel that guilt or that, like, sometimes it almost comes off as resentment a little bit too, that I'm like, why is this still impacting me, or why am I having these feelings and these thoughts?
Grief is a really complex process. Every loss is also unique. So there will be various factors that play into a person's response. That could be anywhere from, the relationship factors in, like how close the person is. There's also the nature of the loss. Because if there's any sort of traumatic way in which the person was lost, that will greatly impact how the person grieves.
I have felt every emotion imaginable, grieving you. But the biggest has been confusion. I don't know why you did what you did. I probably never will. Everything is so different now.
There are deaths that are stigmatized, and those deaths may be drug overdoses, intentional or non-intentional. They may be suicide deaths, because in all of those kinds of deaths, it's unfortunately not unusual for people to ask questions and kind of pry in ways they wouldn't typically otherwise.
Everybody has some kind of trauma in their life, and there's different levels of trauma. I would say that suicide in particular, because of the nature of the way in which someone is choosing to sort of leave this earth, it tends to be one of your bigger traumatic experiences.
When that grief or that trauma is so sudden and so quick, that is something that basically our mind and body can't comprehend in that moment. So we go into a state of shock. So it's basically fight and flight, both pedals to the metal at the same exact time.
They all tried to help. They wanted to help, but they didn't know how. And I didn't know how. I didn't know what to ask from them. Because they all wanted me to be normal. But normal was lost.
It's harder maybe to discuss and approach with other people unless you kind of really know that they're there to be a support. They understand you. So that can become very limiting and isolating, because you want to be able to share with somebody that you're not going to have shame or judgment, or that you're going to be able to share that person's life story in a matter of honoring them. I'm going to call it a disenfranchised loss. It's a loss that's not really acceptable or accepted in our culture, society.
What we're doing is we're judging ourselves for how we feel or what we're experiencing in the moment. And that is a cultural intersection that impacted us probably at a very, very early young age within our culture, that told us it's not okay to feel this way or to think this way or to experience this, okay? So what people do when they come in with me is they try to control that experience. And the problem is, it's not the symptoms that you're having right now. These are natural, these are normal, okay? You should be having them, you should be acknowledging them every day. The disorder in that moment is trying to control them. The problem is you're trying to control something you can't control, and it's got to be exhausting. Okay? And that's what our culture tells us to do.
Just like a lot of things, I think in American society, well, you know, just get over it. For example, you have 3 days of bereavement at most work facilities. If you're in like a traditional work environment, you're given 3 days for grieving, and then you're expected to come back to work. Like, it's not even embedded in the culture of the workplace that people are given permission to grieve.
You can't give them a timeline for how they're supposed to grieve or how this is supposed to happen. It's going to come in ups and downs, and one minute they may be fine, and the next minute they may be angry or crying and unsure of what's going on. And you just have to meet them where they're at and really work through that.
And sometimes what they fall into is, in attempts to try to help make the person feel better, what they actually do is minimize the person's grief. So things like someone has a child die and they're still young. At least you can have another child. Or at least you have another child. Well, that's not helpful. At least they're no longer in pain, the person who died. At least they didn't suffer. Or anything, actually really pretty much anything that starts with at least is something that ought not be said, because what it's doing is minimizing the depth of the experience.
I don't like this experience of my friend that I love or my family member I love being hurt, so I'm going to just kind of throw something at it and hope it goes away. Well, they're at peace now. That's how they deal with it, instead of saying, well, what can I do?
In the immediate aftermath of a death, there's planning, and there's phone calls, and there's ways of getting involved, possibly with food or details or, you know, a service, or, and then all of that kind of ends. The casseroles stop coming, and we're just supposed to go on like business as usual. You might get some theirs, you know, you might get that, but how many people actually say, if you want to talk about this, I'd like to listen, and really follow through? Even questions like, tell me about your friend. Who was he? What was he like? What do you miss? Are there things you don't miss about him?
I used to have dreams that there would be a knock at my door and I would open it and you would be standing there. I don't have those dreams anymore, because I understand that you're gone and that you're never coming back. And in a way, neither am I.
We want to make sure that you're okay and you've moved on and that you can just go about life, and that this is just, like, you can put it aside, right? We want to make sure that's how you're processing it, so that you can move on with life, and knowing that that's not how it goes.
This is a long, slow process. It's going to change your life forever, which means you cannot go back to who you are. We realign, we relearn, we resculpt our thoughts and our emotions and reconnect them with our body. And what that helps do is it helps us to regulate ourselves again to a point where we can sit with things that are difficult and hard and not just process them, but find meaning in them.
Many times, you know, you go in these waves of grief, and imagining it to be like an ocean wave. So it's a larger wave, and the waves are coming in pretty frequent. And but imagine those are your emotions. You know, it's just you're riding this wave, and you're feeling very sensitive that day. You're very emotional. You know, just really aching for them to be there, missing them. And then the next day, you know, you kind of like, okay, well, I got up and I did a couple errands and I redirected, and, you know, it was okay.
You can't go back to the past. You know, acceptance is just about, you know, coming to terms with it. You're not saying it's okay, that you're okay with it. You're just saying, like, you know, this is a new reality and I have to live in this new reality. I'm still going to be sad sometimes.
We can carry two truths at once. I can still hurt and still move forward with my life. Okay? And it's being able to carry both. And there are going to be days that I'm not going to be okay. And there are going to be days when I'm a wreck. And there are going to be days when I just need you to sit next to me while I bawl my eyes out. But I want to tell you this is natural and this is normal. And what's natural and normal is denying that I don't feel this way, or denying that I don't experience these things.
I do want to honor your memory. I want to honor our friendship, as tainted as it's become and as beautiful as it was.
Don't forget them. You know, they are your friends, really. We're so used to having relationship with a human presence of a body. What does that look like, and how, and again, how do we adjust to still have that relationship with their spirit, or, you know, with their aura of your memory of them? Because you're still going to consider your person a friend, you know. And so just give yourself grace and just allow the friendship with their presence within your heart to still be there.
It unnecessarily complicates grieving for us to guilt trip ourselves about whether we're doing it right, whether we're inconveniencing other people, whether, I mean, for me, and I've been in this field over 3 decades, I think death trumps everything.
You know, your process is your process, and you know, if you try to force yourself into something that you're not ready for, you're only going to hold yourself back from, you know, moving through your grief.
A lot of people have experienced death by suicide, or have known somebody, or have been directly impacted by death by suicide, and like, that's, to see how many people it's affected, like, that just lets you know that it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to try to implement change and support. It's not that thing that we have to not talk about, or hush hush, like, don't mention this word. If you talk about suicide, it's going to make it happen more. I think we finally debunked that, and now it's, no, we do need to talk about it. We do need to raise awareness around it. And so those of us who have been impacted, it feels good to be able to do things to help raise that awareness.
Give yourself permission to hurt. Okay? We have a saying in the Native community, sometimes you have to sit on your hands and hurt. Okay? Let people know how you really feel. Don't underestimate your support system, your family, your friends. If they put up a wall or they say things you don't like, let them know in a loving way. Okay? But you're the one, the hardest part here is you're the one who has to take initiative in those, as difficult as it is. You know, and you can heal. Okay, will you ever be fixed? No. Okay, this will change you for the rest of your life, but it doesn't mean that you cannot create a life worth living.